Welcome to the On the Edge podcast.
Why do a lot of those ex-wrestlers, Randy Couture, Matt Hughes, a bunch of the people that have made a name for themselves in fighting, what is it about wrestling that lends itself to that, people getting to that highest level of fighting? Because you mentioned you had trouble with one guy who was a really excellent wrestler, and
more than one, but one that I remembered because it was the one guy that gave me the mouse on my eye. I got a huge golf ball on my eyebrow. He faked a takedown, which he had been hitting that takedown over and over again, and he threw the wildest, ugliest overhand right. But my hands dropped, thinking I was going to stop a takedown for once. Like, I got it this time. Man, I got hit so hard. Oh. I went between rounds. I went to the corner. I'm like, what round is it? Is it the fourth round yet? He's like, dude, it's second round or third round, like whatever round it was. Oh. I was off. Oh man. And you just got to get back in there and suck it up. Like the time I broke my jaw.
Yeah, maybe your trainer should have called it off at that point when you don't know what round it is. You're sitting in the corner thinking you're Batman. Maybe it's time to call it off. But so why do wrestlers kind of excel at some of these mixed martial arts fighting sports?
It is the transition game from the top to the bottom, from standing and boxing to the ground. And it takes the longest to learn how to wrestle. It's the hardest sport of all of them in my opinion. So when they have 2 years of wrestling and you have 6 months, you can't close that gap. So it's like a purple belt versus a white belt in jiu-jitsu. You can't close the gap. So if you have 2 years of wrestling versus someone with no wrestling, I don't care what kind of specimen of a body they have. It's all technique. So if you wrestled in high school and now you're fighting, you have more wrestling than them. So it's just time. That's it.
Yeah, interesting. And what's the different levels? Because I did wrestle in high school. I was an average, I was kind of like a 500 wrestler. I never really broke out and kind of got it the way that some of the guys on our team who were, state level qualifiers and went on to wrestle in high school. So, I was an average wrestler on a state qualifying amazing team. A lot of those guys went to wrestle in wrestle in college. And then there's like a level above that, and then there's a level above that, and then there's it's almost like it just becomes a different sport, right? And then you get to like Olympic level, Jordan Burroughs, all these kind of craziness. So what did you see the gap between, the gap between maybe the guys that you were fighting and then like climbing the next level? Is it a 1% better? Is it a 30% better? Is it the guys at the top, they're actually playing a different sport? Like what are the levels when you start fighting pro?
I think it's how many hours a day are they working? Are they working 4 hours a day and you're working 2? Well, they're twice as far ahead of you. So it's just time. And now you have to run. You have to lift. You have to eat right. You have to sleep right. And it's everything all in one. Because if you're fatigued that day, if you're too sore that day, you're mentally weak that day, it all matters. So back to doing road work, doing things that you hate to do. And I'm sure there's things in your job. You don't, like you said, cleaning the mat. I don't like to clean the mat, but you have to do it. And if you take a shortcut, you're going to lose.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember one time I jumped in an Uber. I ordered like the cheap Uber, and this Escalade shows up. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. So this Escalade shows up, and the driver, 6'7", 6'8", 6'10", something like that. Really tall black dude. And so I jump in and I'm like, hey man, I got to ask, like, what's the story? Like I ordered the cheapest Uber and you show up in an Escalade. He's like, well, I'm making some extra money because I'm starting a basketball academy here in LA. And this is the only car I can sit in comfortably all day. So even though it kills me on the gas, like it's the only way I can make money because I can't sit in a Prius. I'm too tall. So I had a long drive and we talked about his basketball academy he was opening up. And he played basketball for University of Arkansas, Division I. Wasn't quite good enough for the NBA. And then he went to play in European ball for a while. And he was like a high school, college level coach. And so I asked him, I said, hey, what's the difference between you, who obviously had some skill and some athleticism and was blessed to be, born 6'10", versus the guy who's like Lamar Odom, who makes the NBA, versus the guy who like Dirk Nowitzki, who's great, versus the Kobe Bryant, who's one of the best ever. And his answer was so shocking. And he just quickly, without even thinking about it, said, schedule. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, in high school, you know, I was just the tallest guy. And then in college, I was like a physical specimen. If I would have taken my schedule more seriously and done the lifting and gone to bed early and got into the gym an hour early to shoot a bunch of free throws. He's like, I was like Shaq, you know, I shot like 55% free throws, but I was a big dude. I was always getting fouled. If I could have got up to 90% free throws, that might have been enough to get me into the NBA. You know, if I would have eaten chicken breast instead of, you know, In-N-Out cheeseburgers every night for dinner, maybe just that little schedule and those little tweaks in my teens and my 20s, I could have made the NBA. He's like, but you don't figure that out until you're in your 30s, that like schedule matters.
Right.
So it's funny that you're effectively saying the same thing. Like, how can you find a way to put in the hours and do the lifting and do the road work and eat the right food and
be more dedicated than the other person.
Be more dedicated. Oh, scary.